Welcome to the show, dear Mercedes. You have concluded your term as the IMF mission head in Georgia. Thank you for all your efforts for my country, and also thank you for this interview.
Thank you very much, Alain, for the invitation. It's very nice to be here. And I'm very sad to leave my tenure on Georgia. It has been a really nice experience.
And we will talk about that in a little while. But before that, on March 8th, you attended a virtual meeting with the finance minister, Ivan Majawariani, where we read that the sides reviewed the agenda of cooperation between the International Monetary Fund and Georgia, the progress on IMF's financing mechanism, and also made a focus on monetary and fiscal policy of the country in 2021. So my first question would be, how would you assess your tenure, and also what would you call the biggest achievement and also the biggest challenge in IMF support to Georgia?
I feel very honored to have worked on Georgia for the last 4 years. And I think everybody, all the stakeholders in the public sector and the private sector, donors and also the IMF feel very, very rewarded by the experience of the last 4 years. In the context of the IMF, we have a 4-year program under the Enhanced Fund Facility, where we provided almost $600 million to help the authorities assess development needs and build resilience in the economy towards external shock. It's very difficult to highlight one achievement in particular, because I think there have been many achievements. They have been a strengthening of the macro frameworks. They the authorities have also built buffers and have adhered to prudent macro policies. So focusing on only one point will not read well. It doesn't undermine others. What it has been striking, I think, in the context of the pandemic, which definitely has become the biggest challenge for all economies around the world, is the capacity of Georgia to develop a policy support program that have been able to limit the impact of the pandemic on households and families, and also on the economy in general.
On the monetary side, probably you are still following news on Georgia, and you know that NBG just raised the financing rate by 50 basis points to 8.5%. The reason for that was the spillover effect, among many others, was also the spillover effect of lari depreciation on inflation and prices. Well, we all know that tightening monetary policy is not good for the economic growth, to put it very simply for our viewers. And on the other hand, the economy cannot fully open up because there are still risks that are related to COVID situation, and we do not know whether there is any third wave of COVID-19 pandemic in Georgia or globally. And we also are in the situation when the number of businesses in the lockdown are growing, who are questing for subsidies or some kind of tax breaks. What should be the standpoint of the government in kind of managing this quite tough situation?
So you raise a very good point. I think it's very important at this point to have a very, very strong policy coordination, and we have seen it in the economic team. A lot of coordination in monetary and fiscal policy. Monetary policy have tightened because inflation expectations have been increasing, and you have the risk of higher inflation by the end of the year. Inflation affects mostly the vulnerable and reduce the purchasing power for poor families mainly. So it is important to manage inflation and to make sure that inflation doesn't get an anchor over the course of the year. And we know from past experience that exchange rate pass-through to inflation in the case of Georgia is very high. So I think that, there are risks of higher inflation by the end of the year, and monetary policy will need to tighten. In terms of where we are in dealing with the economic impact of the pandemic, our approach and the authorities' approach have been consulting with us has been we need to use fiscal policy more proactively to support the economy. That's why in 2020 we formulated together with the authorities a package of almost 4% of GDP to help the business and the households. Also to increase capital spending so that jobs could be maintained and in the sector, and that generates synergies to the private sector also. Going forward in 2021, that policy support is remaining at least for the first half of the year. I think the big question will be, as we are seeing the economy will be recovering in 2021, how we just smooth or balance the withdrawal of the policy stimulus with the private sector and private sector demand coming as a source of growth for Georgia.
Yes, that seems a very big question indeed, because Standard & Poor's also said recently that today's figure for the debt, which currently stands at around 63% of GDP, might rise by almost 6 percentage points. And this is because of the expectations for lari depreciation in future and also new debt that can be accumulated by the government. What is your take on that? That's my first question. And the second question, when you already mentioned that at least that we are seeing the signs that 2021 could not be the year of recovery. When should this fiscal consolidation start that you have been accentuating in our previous interviews?
So let me clarify by starting to say we are seeing 2021 as the year for recovery. There will be a recovery this year. Yes, the economy will grow. Yes, because also the impact of the pandemic in 2020 was significantly large, right? So we are seeing this year recovering. We are seeing vaccinations, the campaigns starting not only in Georgia, but also around the rest of the world. And so that will have a pickup in demand.
Yeah, so you wouldn't call it like a transition year. You are still calling it a recovery year.
It's a recovery year. We are projecting positive growth this year. So we are expecting the economy to start recovering. Now, we are not going back to GDP levels since in 2019, for example. It will take a little bit of time. We are expecting a gradual recovery in terms of GDP for Georgia, as we are projecting for many of the countries, right? So, for example, the fact that tourism sector we are not projecting a recovery in tourism sector to the 2019 levels until 2022, 2023. We are just hoping that there will be a gradual recovery in tourism. Will take a little bit of time for the economy to recover to GDP levels since in 2019. But we are seeing a recovery this year. And the challenge will be, okay, as you are recovering and the rest of the global economy is recovering, and we are seeing that in advanced economies, our growth performance have been much stronger than the growth projections that we have for the end of 2020. As the global economy recover, you could see a rapid decrease in global demand, and that will help Georgia to grow through exports, right? So, in that process, and depending how quickly domestic and external demand pick up, the authorities will need to calibrate their withdrawal of the policy support that have been provided for the pandemic. In terms of the debt dynamics, I'm not sure how Standard & Poor's come about the calculations of the increase in 6 percentage points of GDP due to the lari depreciation. It seems a little bit large in my mind, because you have 2/3 of your public debt in external debt in FX. and that will require a significant magnitude of the depreciation of the exchange rate that we are not seeing in the markets at the moment. At the same time, I think the central bank has been very proactive in trying to avoid excessive volatility in the exchange rate for several reasons. And that's good, but we don't see significant pressures in the FX market at the moment towards lari depreciation.
Lari is a very interesting topic nowadays because recently head of the parliamentary committee on economy and economic policy, David Sumpulashvili, he said, and let me quote him directly, that we need some type of new specific action plan for the lari stability and specific steps in coordination with the NBG. Unfortunately, we do not know any specifics, what he meant specifically under these words, because we see tightening of the monetary policy. We also see selling reserves, which indirectly is also having an impact on the FX market as well. What's there else that could be used as a tool for the exchange market stability? That's my first question. And also another question is it wise to question in any way right now the floating exchange rate?
Let me start by saying that the lari has always been a very important issue in Georgia. It's not only now.
That's a very true comment.
Yeah. But I mean, our position has been very clear. I think, Georgia is a small open economy, is vulnerable to external shocks. It needs the exchange rate flexibility because it needs the exchange rate to play the role of the shock absorber. I think, of course, you don't want excessive volatility, and that's what I think what the central bank has tried to prevent as a result of the pandemic shock. That's why it has been intervening. But you need exchange rate flexibility in Georgia. I don't think that having an unstable exchange rate will help. What you need are policies that help you to allow the exchange rate to have a full role as a shock absorber. Policies about reducing dollarization in the economy will be very helpful because they will help your monetary policy to be more effective and the exchange rate to be more flexible. If people don't earn dollars, they should not borrow in dollars because there are risks associated to borrowing in dollars. So I think the idea and our reasoning has been you need an exchange rate that is flexible. Let's strengthen the monetary framework so that and reduce that dollarization so that you can effectively have an exchange rate that can work as a shock absorber. And I think it's very important here that the central bank independence in the conduct of monetary policy and in the conduct of its mandate is preserved on a permanent basis.
And today we see that there are also fundamental factors that are interfering with lari, and they have become factors for the depreciation.
Maybe you can elaborate on these fundamental factors because I'm not sure what you are referring to. And the second thing is we don't project
exports and
I see.
all these sources that bring in
of course.
Yes, currency to the country.
Okay, now that's clear. No, of course, you have a massive shock in 2020. You have Georgia being an economy that has been where exports and tourism has been great sources of FX, right? And that dry up during 2020. So as the economy recovered, you will see a normalization of the FX flows, and hopefully you will see also the central bank having to play less of a role in the provision of foreign exchange in the coming years.
And another factor here is also FDI, because we have seen drastic figures for FDI, which is very significantly down. What could be rational expectations for FDI figures and FDI's role in the overall economic structure of the country in coming years, when we see that the impact of pandemic is tough not only on Georgia but also on other countries as well, and what could be found as such quick way, so to say, for the economic growth?
So this is a very good question, because I mean, yes, FDI flows have decreased significantly in 2020. It has happened globally. Georgia has also not been different from the rest of the country. I think it's important that as the economy recovers, special efforts are put in place to attract FDI. You are in a location that can be very attractive between East and West, and we have talked in the past about Georgia being at the crossroads, and the fact that you have a free trade agreement with China and also with the European Union can help some companies find location advantages by being placed in Georgia. And for an economy like Georgia, you don't need to bring very big companies. I mean, those are welcome and they bring a lot of know-how, but you also can bring a small, medium-sized enterprises, right? That can bring a lot of know-how and will have a significant impact in Georgia. So I think, promoting the location, promoting the free trade agreements that you have, continue to benefit from a very strong business environment. Georgia ranks very well across countries in the world in terms of how easy it is to create a company, get a permit, pay taxes. Those are advantages for companies when they are looking at where to locate in the world. I think from the pandemic, what we learned is that there have been significant supply shocks, supply disruption. So what we are seeing is maybe companies or sectors are thinking more about developing regional value chains rather than global value chains. So here you are going to see probably more of regional value chains. And here I think Georgia can also benefit from that and attract investment. Definitely, you need FDI.
You also mentioned that this pandemic had the worst impact on the poor population, including in Georgia, of course. And we can see this in figures. In just 1 year, we have 100,000 more people that are now under poverty line. Is there a room for the economy to be inclusive without the growth rates like even what Georgia had in 2019? And also, do you think this is the time to have more targeted programs which will be targeted to these poor people rather than having some kind of universal approach?
No, this is a very important question and a big challenge, not only for Georgia, but also for the rest of the world. And in terms of what we are seeing in Georgia, the impact on the poor is harder because there are no buffers. They don't have savings to draw from when they are not allowed to work. It's quite a challenging situation. During 2020, in the context of our program with the authorities, actually, some of the support that has been provided have been targeted to families with low income and to families that have lost their jobs and to people working in the informal sector that cannot do their jobs anymore because of the containment measures and the limits on mobility that needed to be imposed. We see a social assistance program in Georgia well targeted. I mean, we have used it in the past to increase support to the old, to the sick, to children. And I think continuing to focus the help on those that most need that help will be important in the future.
I just have to mention it here because you cannot do without. This is the context that Georgia is currently in. Of course, I'm not asking you to comment in any way on current political situation, but I'm bringing this example of political polarization because I want to read out one more quote, and this is the direct quote from the European Council statement following the 6th Association Council meeting between EU and Georgia. And let me read the quote. The Association Council welcomed the disbursements of macrofinancial assistance to Georgia in November 2020 and urged Georgia to continue the implementation of outstanding agreed policy measures in order to enable the disbursement of the second installment of the COVID macro financial assistance to Georgia, which 75 million euro was already disbursed in 2020. The EU encouraged Georgia to ensure the sustainability of already implemented reforms and maintain macroeconomic stability. And the special emphasis is again on rule of law, and which has been on the agenda of structural reforms of the IMF constantly for Georgia. And also there is an urge to have a reform on state-owned enterprises, which we already heard from you in our several interviews. What would be your thoughts on this in this short-term context? Will Georgia need this money to alleviate all the problems that we have in economy during this period and due to lockdowns and also constraints of the mobility, which you also mentioned, because even those businesses do not fully benefit who are now to some extent open.
When we assessed last time the situation of the Georgian economy in 2000, at the end of 2020, we identified significant financing needs, external financing needs for 2021. They are around $1 billion. When we worked together with our partners and with the Georgian authorities and the donor community, we put together a package that allowed for that financing to be fulfilled. And that takes into account the macro financial assistance from the European Union. It's very important that the authorities do the reforms that are aligned with that disbursement. And it's important to get this financing because it allows to have for the authorities and the fiscal authorities to execute fully on the budget. Then, I know as a side effect, you also build up reserves, which are very important at this point. In terms of the reforms, so we have one more review to go for the conclusion of this program. It will happen sometime in April. There is some conditionality like we have in every review, and one part or one element of the commitment of the authorities in terms of reforms is to prepare a strategy for the reforms of the state-owned enterprises. This has been discussed with the authorities. There have been some publication of reports about what needs to be done. And the core principle that we are working here is that a state-owned enterprise needs to have good governance. Right? So the idea is to strengthen the governance of the SOEs. We are discussing with the authorities the element of that agenda, and we hope that afterwards it's not an immediate reform. It takes time to do this kind of reforms. They can start implementing in the near years.
It is very interesting here. What are some of the options for reaching this goal that you mentioned with state-owned enterprises? Is it a privatization process? Is it some kind of PPP projects? What's being discussed on the table? If that's okay to air it.
So our Fiscal Affairs Department has been providing technical assistance, and we have not reached the step. We are not here to tell any authorities whether they should privatize or whether they should keep state-owned enterprises. There is principles in the provision, for example, of public goods, where you need state-owned enterprises because you will not have private sector coming to provide a specific public good that is needed for society. We are at the stage where we are discussing or have been discussing with the authorities how to strengthen the governance. So making sure that state-owned enterprises are run on a commercial basis, that, you know, they are accountability and transparency in the way business are done, that, you know, that they are well-run companies so that contingent liabilities to their budget are limited. And in that sense, I think in Georgia, the efforts have been quite significant in terms of trying to understand what are the contingent liabilities that a state-owned enterprise could pose to the budget.
We hear so often lately that that Georgia is yet again on crossroads to its development. Do you think that momentum is there, and what should Georgia take as a signal and not let it go?
So we have talked about this for many years, and yes, Georgia in itself geographically is at a crossroad between east and west, and that gets reflected also in their economy. I mean, this is a middle-income country that needs to develop further, and we have been discussing in the past with you, the aim will be to get emerging market status, right, and try to continue increasing income and increasing the wealth and spreading that wealth to promote inclusive growth. I don't think there will be a signal that will tell you, okay, from now on, this will happen.
So that's
I wish. I think what is important and something that we have seen in the past years have been, you know, keep the momentum for reform. You know, we have been discussing the need to increase the resilience of the economy to shocks. For that, you need to increase fundamentals. So you need more capital, you need more investment, you need a stronger human capital. And we have been discussing the education reform with authorities. We have been discussing it with our partners, international partners like the World Bank. You know, you need to strengthen, you need to, and that will help you to diversify and increase your production base. And something that I really admire from the different counterparts that I have the privilege to engage with in my tenure in Georgia is that there is a very strong commitment to reform. And there is a strong commitment to seek prosperity in Georgia. And that's from the public, but also from the private sector.
Let me just add here that there is no question that Georgia needs to stick very closely to its Euro-Atlantic aspirations, because this is crucial for our economic security and also for our well-being in the long run. And another crossroads also that I see right now it's the vaccination process. We have started and this vaccination process with AstraZeneca, but what we see right now is that misinformation is working, unfortunately, like in any other country. There are doubts around this vaccine, and the pace of vaccination is quite low, unfortunately. Despite the fact that neither me nor you are epidemiologists here, and we acknowledge this to the full extent, I would, your thoughts on this process would be still useful for my country at this stage. I have talked with Mr. Jihad Azur from the IMF recently, and he said that accelerating vaccination is the way to open up the economy. Your thoughts on that, please?
Thank you, Elaine. As you said, we are not epidemiologists, but I mean, definitely any country wants to get herd immunity as soon as possible, right? So I think getting the vaccination campaign implemented in an efficient way, people going and getting vaccinated will be very important. It's the only way we have to go to what people call the new normal, but probably to go back to normal, hopefully. So that we don't have to, countries do not have to implement new containment measures. and we can restore the economic channels that have been disrupted during the last year. I really, I follow the news. I know that some countries have stopped the vaccination process with AstraZeneca. I listen to news that also say that the risks are very minor. I think it's very important to continue with that vaccination process and also think about alternatives. Getting herd immunity as soon as possible will allow Georgia to restore economic activity sooner rather than later, and that's very important. Also because you have an economy that in the past has depended a lot of tourism, and I have no doubt that tourism will recover. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to travel after being 1 year at home.
Exactly. If you could tell Georgia's story during these 4 years of your tenure, what would be the main figures for Georgia for you, and also the main reforms undertaken or started during these 4 years?
So I think one of the biggest achievements was to be able to have prudent macro policies that allow Georgia to build buffers and to put a very policy response or support when the pandemic hit. Where Georgia, when I came into Georgia, there was macroeconomic stability, but the composition of the budget, for example, was geared towards current spending. We have, the authorities shifted to capital investment, and they have been able to advance some of the major infrastructure projects. There is also a lot of achievements in terms of strengthening macro framework. So there have been significant achievements in terms of tax administration, improving tax administration, strengthen the budget process, and the fiscal rule, for example, was revised and have been strengthened, and is a good anchor in terms of how fiscal policy should be conducted in the coming years. On the monetary financial sector side, there have been also significant improvements in terms of strengthening the resilience of the financial sector to shock. There have been prudent macro prudential policies that have allowed to reduce FX mix matches in the household sectors. Those were welcome because they generate risk for financial stability. The authorities also revised, for example, or put in place a resolution framework that is in line with best practice. So there have been a lot of reforms, and all of them add to building the resilience of this economy to shock. This economy needs jobs for the people, and you want people to be able to participate in economic activity, and not mostly in the informal sector. You want them in the formal sector, and you want to be part of the economic activity of the country.
How was working in Georgia different from other from other experiences of your professional career?
Yeah. So, this has been, I think, the most rewarding professional experience that I have so far. And my career has been long at the IMF, but really I came to love Georgia. I think a few things I highlight that experience has been, it's really impressive, how engaged the authorities are. And how engaged others are in the economic process, in the reform program, and how much impact you can have in the discussions. We have a very productive dialogue with the authorities, with the private sector, in terms of discussing priorities for reforms, in terms of implementing reforms. I think also something that is very different in Georgia to other countries is the amount of donor support. You have a lot of international partners, and this is an opportunity that not many other countries benefit from. It's really impressive to see how many friends Georgia has in the international community. And when the package last year, we put the package in terms of the policy response in May for the pandemic, having this collaboration with international partners and being able in a very short period of time to mobilize financing for this country is really something that I admire. But that reflects how the Georgians are, right? And how committed you are to your country and the prosperity of your country. And that is something that I really admire.
What did this experience of working in Georgia give you personally, Mercedes Vera-Martin?
So, first of all, it gave me the opportunity to explore and to get to know this wonderful country. The culture, the food, the wine, I'm Spaniard. We do celebrate everything around food and meals and family. And you discovered these wonderful supras, and that has been really rewarding. You also build friendships, and I feel sorry not to be in Tbilisi or not having the opportunity to go to Tbilisi at the moment, because I want to see my friends in Georgia. And definitely you have also a beautiful country. I have the opportunity to travel a little bit around the country, because you just cannot be in Georgia and not trying to explore the beauty of this country. So I really hope I can go to Georgia as soon as possible.
Yes, and we hope to see you here here as well. Wish you all the success in your new job. And thank you for taking our questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. It has been really wonderful to work with you and your colleagues in Forbes and to have this wonderful relation with you. And I really hope all the best for you, all the best for Georgia. And we hope to see you soon in Tbilisi, hopefully.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
We are BMG. Follow and subscribe for business and economics news.